Today we're going to be doing Unit 1, Notes 4-A, and we're going to be talking about graphing inequalities. So earlier in this unit you solved inequalities when you only had one variable. Well, when we have two variables, we actually have to graph them to find the solution. So to start, we're going to do a little bit of a review of graphing. So example number 1, y is equal to negative 3x plus 5. So we're going to go ahead and graph that. That's already in slope-intercept form for us. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to graph my y-intercept, which is 5. So I'm going to find 5 on the y-axis, which is here. And then negative 3 is the same as negative 3 over 1. So I'm going down 3 over 1, and I'm plotting that point. Okay, once I have those 2 points plotted, I can go ahead and draw my line. Now, for example number 2, in order to graph that, negative x plus 3y is equal to 6. In order to graph that, we have to solve for y. So I'm going to start by adding x to both sides. I want to get y on a side completely by itself. So then I have 3y is equal to x plus 6. Next thing I'm going to do is divide both sides by 3. And then I get y is equal, and we have x over 3, which I'm going to write as 1/3 x because that helps me to see my slope. And then 6 divided by 3 is 2. So if we go back up here, I'm crossing the y-axis at 2. And then my slope was 1/3, so I'm going up 1 over 3 and plotting that point. I'm going to go ahead and draw my line. It's not as great as yours, I'm sure. Next, we have x is equal to 5. Well, if you guys remember, when we have x is equal to 5, that's going to be an undefined slope. So we're going to have a vertical line. So the first thing I'm going to do is find 5 on the x-axis. Remember, the x-axis is the horizontal one. Then I'm going to draw, a vertical line through x is equal to 5. Vertical lines are undefined. Whenever you have something that's x is equal to, you're going to have a vertical line. Okay, moving forward. Let's take a look at what these symbols mean. You don't have to write this down. Let's just remember that. So first we have the less than symbol, and when we're doing word problems, we want to look for things such as not as much as or fewer than. And then we have the greater than symbol, so we want to look for things that say more than. The less than or equal to, which is at most or no more than. And then the greater than or equal to, which is no less than or at least. Okay, so let's talk about graphing inequalities with two variables. Whoops, that worked well, didn't it? So we're going to go ahead and pull this over here. Okay, so what it is it's going to look like something like y is greater than 3x plus 5, or 2x minus 4y is less than 8. Okay, so what we're going to do is, since we have two variables in them, we can't just solve it like a normal inequality. We have to graph them. That was what I was kind of talking about at the beginning. So go ahead and jot some notes down in the box. I want you to write something down that will help you remember when you need to graph inequalities. Okay, let's take a look at this one. First, we start with some pretty easy inequalities to set up in slope-intercept form. So this is number 4. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our steps. Oops. Come on. Okay, so that's not working, so I'm just going to handwrite the steps for you. So step 1 would be to decide where we want to shade. Okay, so step 1 is, do we shade up or down? So if the inequality is opening towards the y, like either of those two symbols, then you're going to shade up. If the inequality is opening away from the y, like those symbols, you're going to shade down. Step number 2 is to determine what type of line. So if I have y and it's either less than or greater than, and there's no solid line underneath, so notice how there's no solid line underneath, then that would be a dotted line. Okay, and then if y has a line underneath, like so, then it would be a solid line. Now, these steps are all assuming that your line is in slope-intercept form. If it's not in slope-intercept form, then you need to go ahead and put it into slope-intercept form. Step number 3 is to graph the line. And step number 4 would be to shade. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. First thing I notice is that the alligator is facing away from the Y, so I'm going to be shading down. Then I notice that there's a line underneath the inequality, so I'm going to have a solid line. So I'm going to go ahead and graph this. So I'm crossing the y-axis at 3. Then from 3, I'm going up 2 over 1. Okay, so remember when it's just a number, that's the same as 2 over 1. So now I'm going to graph, and I'm going to have a solid line because it has a line underneath. And now I need to shade up. So what does that mean? Or sorry, I need to shade down. So what does that mean? So what I do is I put my pen somewhere on the line. And then I'm just going to go down. And wherever my pen lands, that's where I'm going to shade. So I'm going to shade in this region right here. So that's your answer for number 4. That's the graph. You're done. Let's take a look at number 5. So for number 5, we want to graph this. So let's first decide where we want to shade. Well, it's opening towards the y, so we're going to shade up. And then it doesn't have a line underneath. Well, it does because I just drew one, but it didn't originally. So it's going to be a dotted line. So this right here is our y-intercept. So we're crossing the y-intercept at -6. Now this doesn't have a number out in front of it, so I'm just going to put a 1 or a 1 over 1. So our slope then is just up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. And we're going to connect all of those with a dotted line. So I kind of do dashed like that. And all that's telling us is that if we were to look at our solution, this line itself is not included in the solution, but everything in our shaded region is, except for the line. Now, the alligator is opening towards the y, so that means we need to shade up. So I'm going to pick a spot on my line, and I'm just going to go up from it. And where my pen lands, that's where I'm going to shade for number 5. So if you look back at number 4, when we had a solid line, that tells us that that solid line is, then that line is included in our solution. So that's the difference between the solid and the dotted line. So let's take another look at that. Let's take a look at number 6. So number 6, it has a line underneath, so we know it's going to be solid. And the alligator is also opening towards the y, so I know I'm shading up. All right, so to start off with, I'm crossing the y-axis at 2. Because that's my y-intercept, and then -4 is the same as -4 over 1. So I'm going down 1, 2, 3, 4, and over 1. Okay, now I have a solid line connecting those 2 points, so draw that solid line. And then from that solid line, I want to shade up. I want to shade up. Let me shade up, please. I want to shade up. So then we're going to shade in that region right there. So that's your final answer for number 6. I want you guys to go ahead and try number 7 on your own. Okay, so see where it's crossing the y-axis and then use the slope. You're going to have a dotted line and you're going to shade up. Come and see me at the desk if you need more help with it. Okay, let's take a look at these. These are a little bit tricky because they're in standard form. Uh-oh, so what does that mean for us? What does that mean? Well, let's take a look. So, what we need to do first and foremost is we need to put this into standard form or into slope-intercept form. So we have 3x minus 2y is greater than -6. So what I need to do is I need to get y by itself. So the first thing I notice is that that 3x is positive. So I need to subtract 3x from both sides. So then I get -2y is greater than -3x minus 6. So now that 2 is being multiplied by the y. So to get rid of that -2, I'm going to divide both sides by a -2. Now think way back to that unit when we did the inequalities in the first week of school. Okay, if you remember correctly, if you divide by a negative, you have to flip the sign. So I need to flip this and make it less than. And now I need to divide each of these terms. So -3 over -2, that's going to become positive, and we have 3/2 x. -6 divided by -2 is going to be a positive 3. So let's go ahead and graph that. So we're crossing the y-axis at 3, and then we're going up 3 and over 2 to our next point, because that's our slope. So we check you always want to check your final answer when you're looking at the inequality symbols. So I notice in my final answer that I still don't have a line underneath the inequality. So it's still going to be a dotted line. However, when I was solving for y, I flipped the sign. So now it's facing away from the y. So I actually have to shade down. So you have to be really, really careful with that, because if you divide by a negative, what you looked at originally isn't going to work up here. Okay? Let's take a look at number 9. So we have 5x plus y is less than or equal to 10. So let's just write that down here. So we have 5x plus y is less than or equal to 10. So we need to solve this for y. This is a positive 5x. So to get it to the other side, I'm going to subtract 5x. And then I'm going to get y is less than or equal to negative 5x plus 10. Okay, so let's take a look at this graph. So we're crossing the y-axis at 10. Well, we don't have a 10 on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have each of these go up by 2's. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So my y-intercept is here. Now my slope is a negative 5 over 1. I'm going to have these still go by 1's. Okay, so to go down 5, I need to go to here. And then over 1 would be to here. Okay, so that gets a little bit tricky. If you're confused changing your scale, please come talk to me and we'll work on it together. So if we look at our final answer, we still have a line underneath our inequality, so we're going to have a solid line. And then our final inequality is still facing away from the y, so I'm going to pick a spot on the line and I'm going to shade down. So I'm going to shade below the line, which is right here. All right, let's take a look at these ones. So again, we need to convert them into slope-intercept form. So let's go ahead and do that with this one here. Okay, so let's do that. So we have y plus 3x is less than or greater than or equal to y plus 3x is greater than or equal to negative 6. So now we want to go ahead and solve that for y. So we're plussing 3x, which means we need to subtract 3x in order to solve for y. So now I have y is greater than or equal to negative 3x minus 6. So now we're crossing the y-axis at negative 6, which I can plot here. Then we're going down 3 over 1. Well, if I go down 3 over 1, I'm off the graph. So we talked about how down and right is negative. Well, also up and left is also negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up 3 and over 1 to the left. Notice how my line is still going down. Whoops. That didn't go very well, did it? Whoop. I think the sound effects help, don't you guys agree? Okay, so let's go ahead and we went up 3 over 1. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a solid line because there's a line underneath that inequality. Then I notice that the inequality is still opening towards my y. So since the alligator is opening towards my y, I shade up from the line. So I pick a spot on the line and shade up. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. I'm going to solve it out for you guys, and then I want you to graph it. So to solve for y, we're going to have to divide by a negative 2. So I'm dividing by a negative, so that means I'm going to have to flip my sign. 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2x. Negative 10 divided by negative 2 is positive 5. So we have negative 2x plus 5. So what I want you guys to do is to go ahead and graph this. Notice that you're going to have a dotted line and the alligator's opening towards the y, so you're going to be shading up. So I do want to see a completed note sheet in order to get your homework. Thanks for listening.